Step into the twilight with us at Paranormal M, where we illuminate the shadows of the supernatural. Don't miss out on our thrilling adventures. Subscribe and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest spine-tingling tales. Let the exploration commence. The Man Who Slit His Throat. Maybe somebody went through something similar. About 3 years ago, I was working in a small office. I became close with the girl across my desk. We call her Jane. Jane and I confided in each other about our lives and lended advice when needed, but never hung out outside of work. One day, she got a call about an hour into our shift. She turned white and started shaking. She walked out a couple of minutes, and when she returned, you could tell she'd been crying. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that her childhood friend's father committed suicide. He slit his own throat. Her friend, we'll call her Sam, found him dead from bleeding out. I didn't know these people, but I felt so terrible for their family. Throughout the week, Jane would talk to me about the drama surrounding this man's death. Around that next Monday is when things started to get weird for me. My husband and I lived in a small apartment. He left for work before me. As I was locking up and about to walk out the door, I got the shivers, and a voice in my head told me, "Don't turn around." So obviously I turned around, and standing in the bedroom was an older gentleman with glasses. Maybe 5'8", staring at me with a solemn look. I basically noped the fuck out of there and headed to work. I go about my day as usual. Jane was pissed when I got in. She came over to my desk and showed me the man's obituary picture. "Can you believe they used this?" How inappropriate considering the circumstances. It's like he's saying he did a good job or something. I looked at this picture, and it was the old man from this morning. He was posing with his thumb up. I lost my breath and managed to get out a, "Wow, yeah, how shitty." When I got home, I plopped into bed and my husband joins me. He falls asleep. I'm scrolling on my phone when all of a sudden he twitches and jolts awake. Concerned, I asked him if he was okay. He doesn't respond right away. He looked at me confused and then replies, "Yeah, but there was an old man with glasses that got in my face." Needless to say, I sought counsel and saged and salted the apartment. And my husband and we haven't seen the guy since. I felt kind of bad making him go, but I didn't know what to do. I already knew beforehand that Jane didn't believe in that stuff. She still doesn't know to this day. I hope he crossed over or found wherever he was supposed to go. Paranormal entity took the shape of my mom. A little backstory. When I was about 9 years old, a young woman moved into the trailer park down the street from my house. She appeared to be in her late teens, early 20s, tall and thin with long straight blonde hair and pale skin. We would always see her walking up and down the street, and she always seemed to act a little strange. She scared the daylights out of my parents one night as they were unloading groceries from the car. They snuck up behind them and asked them if they needed help, before asking if she could have some of the food. When cars began being broken into and having items stolen, many of the neighbors suspected it was this woman. She always seemed to pop up everywhere. One day I was out in front of my house playing hopscotch with my sister. We were about 3 at the time. My grandmother was inside keeping an eye on us through the window while she watched TV. She was babysitting while my parents were at work. Anyways, we were playing when I looked up and saw my mom walking down the street towards us. Now, I have to tell you, my mom was in her late 30s, and on the shorter side, a little overweight, and had very short, dark brunette hair. I remember this so clearly because I stood there staring at her in confusion for a good 10 seconds straight. First I wondered, why isn't Mom at work? Where's the car? What happened? Then I looked harder to make sure it was my mom, and I had no doubt that it was. To confirm this even more, at the moment my sister entered my confusion, she just yelled, "Mommy!" started to run towards her. Distracted by this, I moved my gaze away from my mom, in quotes, to look at my sister. She ran about 5 steps before stopping suddenly with her eyes wide. I looked back up at my mom, but this time it didn't look like my mom anymore. It was the young woman from the trailer park. Looked absolutely nothing like my mother. She was smiling at us and continued walking our way. My heart felt like it was going to fall out of my body as I grabbed my sister, pulled her inside the house as fast as I could. I thought about telling my grandma, but even as a kid I knew how crazy it sounded, so I never told her or my parents. The woman stopped coming around shortly after this happened, and everybody assumed that she moved away. To this day, it's always bothered me because I know it was real and I have no explanation for it. This experience still haunts me. So I was cleaning my upstairs bathroom when my younger brother came upstairs and says nothing. He just goes in the bedroom. Call out to him, "Yo, can you take your shower now?" He doesn't respond. So I call out again, still no response. So now, slightly angry that he was ignoring me, I marched in the bedroom and then my heart skipped. He wasn't there. That was when I kinda started freaking out. I ran down the stairs to the dining room and started hysterically rambling to my parents about how my brother had just disappeared. And then they laughed. "Your brother's in the kitchen," my dad said, putting his fork down. "You seeing ghosts?" "Maybe our house is haunted," my mom quipped. As soon as she says that, my brother walks past me when I saw he was wearing completely different clothes from the clothes I saw him wearing upstairs. It took a while for me to calm down, and I had insomnia for a while after that. Gambling-phone manipulation. I've been trying to make sense of a recent experience I had, which feels like a ghost story. I use a gambling app for football on my phone. Sunday I clicked on the app, looked at a specific football game's options. The Philadelphia Eagles versus the Green Bay Packers Sunday night game. When I opened the section for the same game parlays, several options lit up, and then faded away to the normal button color. For just a split second, my eyes saw the lit choices. My brain was able to remember 5 different options, although I know more were lit up at that one brief initial moment. I didn't have a long time, or really any time at all. It was only a fraction of a second, like a blink really. So I clicked on the 5 options. 4 individual players scored touchdowns, and the Eagles are plus 6.5. The selection of the 5 legs in one parlay gave odds of about maybe 4,500, which means that $450 are won for every $1 played. Excuse me. So I said, why not seeing that lit up buttons were unusual, and I'm typically alert to strange signs and coincidences. The game was a high-scoring game, and the Eagles won by 7. All of the legs of the bet hit, and I won big. The sum is very helpful, and I understand I'm very lucky, but I can't make sense of the buttons being lit up. My uncle was a huge Eagles fan. He passed when I was young. It feels like his presence or something was there. Even watching the game felt strange. All the legs of the bet flowed consistently, and by halftime I had 3 of the 5 legs of the bet won, and I just knew that I'd been given something by someone or some presence. Everyone I talk to about it doesn't seem to entertain the experience I know to be true. The bed is so unusual compared to any of my usual beds. My best guess is something supernatural. I now know that there is something beyond our understanding that can influence our physical environment. I'm not a gambler or a sports person, but send that ghost over here. I'm hungry. Spooky experience near Clayaloom, Washington. When I was 18, I went on my first trip alone to Seattle from Montana. I was alone with my dog. It was a pretty normal trip overall, except we were driving late at night. I was listening to the BBC talk show on AM, and they were talking about some subject I don't really remember, but it was spooky and the radio was super staticky. We were in the area of I-90 that doesn't have much signal, pretty much just 100% empty and quiet before the pass. I suddenly got really tired and my radio wasn't working, so I decided to pull off and sleep. I decided to pull off on a deserted exit with no services before Clayaloom. I believe it was called 6 Mile Road or something like that. Anyways, it was extremely dark. Couldn't see anything to my sides or in front of me. There was a fog on the road, swirling around just in front of my headlights. There was absolutely nothing around me for a mile, and the roads didn't veer off anywhere. After a bit of driving, I pulled up to this huge white and gray warehouse with no windows. There were several white vans and black cars parked around. They looked very expensive for being in the middle of nowhere. The warehouse was locked by a huge barbed wire fence. I backed up my car a bit and decided to park by some trees, since it didn't appear that anyone was around. Everything was still dark and silent. There was no wind except for a slight breeze carrying the fog around the cement. I turned my car off completely and wrapped myself up in my blanket, locked all my doors, and I was laying there trying to sleep. Looking at the time on my phone, it was 2 a.m. That same moment, my car started to physically shake. My dog started whining and hid behind the passenger chair, obviously distressed. I looked outside my window, but everything was pitch black without my headlights. Couldn't see anything, but my car was shaking back and forth and side to side, like something was grabbing it. I turned it on, freaking out, and backed up. There was still nothing around me at all except for the strange facility. There were no animals, no people, and my car stopped shaking as soon as I backed up. I had this horrible feeling of dread, and a feeling like I was being watched, that I wasn't supposed to be there. I left the area as fast as I could, and when I got back on the road, I noticed that my car's time was now 4:30 a.m. I had a quarter of a tank less gas. It was already getting light out. I don't remember going anywhere, and my phone's time matched the car. There's only 1 hour of time difference between Montana and Washington, so it wasn't that. I still to this day don't know what happened there. Tried looking up the area with my ex on Google Maps a year ago, and I found a weird government facility near Clayaloom with a weird name. That may have been the warehouse that I went to. I'll have to try to find it again. It definitely feels like something I should not have seen, or rather felt. My little brother's imaginary friend. I, a 25-year-old female, have always remembered these experiences from my childhood as the most confusing and scary times growing up. My brother is 3 years younger than me, and this all started happening when he was around 4 or 5. We can call my brother B. B, as a child, had health problems, needed a lot of different surgeries. He was in and out of the hospital often. The way my mom would tell this is that this all started with my brother having horrendous night terrors, so bad that he would sit upright in bed with a blood-curdling scream. He would be thrashing his arms and legs. When B would wake up, he would have no recollection of his dream. But as time went on, B started to talk to somebody at night, and his toy fire trucks would start to light up with the siren going off. My mom would wake up in the morning and the clocks would all be set to 2:15 a.m. In our house, we had a storage room under the stairs. The storage room was right next to B's and I's playroom. B would always say that John, in quotes, and his mom lived in that storage room, and he would go knock on the door and say, "Hi, John's mom. Can John come out and play with me and my sister?" I never really thought anything of it being a child and my parents telling me that B had an imaginary friend. B would want us to set us like an extra plate for John at the dinner table and buckle him into the car, etc. Would freak out completely if my parents didn't comply. We had weird things going on in the house. My baby dolls would go off non-stop to the point my mom took the batteries out and shoved the dolls in the bottom of the toy box. And in one specific situation still went off even without the batteries. We also had this motion sensor Big Bird plushie that constantly went off, and when nobody was in the room, the toy would be turned off. This went on for at least a year. My mom said that the breaking point was my brother crying in the kitchen saying him and John got into a fight, with B saying that I told John that we can't be friends anymore because I have bones and he doesn't. That same night, I woke up to a woman calling my name, standing at the side of my bed. When I rolled over and opened my eyes, she immediately asked me, "Where's John?" I didn't reply. She seemed to get upset and asked again, "Where's John?" I again didn't reply. I was so scared. Rolled over, closed my eyes. When I rolled back over, she was gone. So I booked it into my parents' room. My mom let me sleep in their bed for the night. The next night I remember my mom talking to a priest and another strange man. My mom has since told me the priest was to bless the house, and the other man was a medium to help John and his mom cross over. The medium was able to tell my mom that John and his mom passed away in a house fire, which has always messed with me because the main toy that went off was B's fire truck. I mean, it was set off every night. Was John trying to tell us something, and attached to B the last time he had surgery? After the blessing and encounter with the medium, John and his mom were never encountered again. Hope they found their way to the light. Mysterious, muddy boot prints. I'm a 38-year-old female, and I've thought about what I experienced I should pretty much share next. I have many, though. I've started these stories now on Reddit because it's an anonymous way to get all these out, and seen or heard. And this particular story is about the events that led up to a mysterious muddy footprint in my hallway that to this day I still have zero logical answer to explain away. When I was approximately 26 years old, I moved into a place all on my own. A tiny little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. I was tired of living with roommates, decided I'd live on my own without being bothered by anybody, and, well, happened to find an available apartment across the hall from my best friend's apartment. I knew her place to be pretty haunted. There were several experiences I had there, but figured living in my own apartment would be quiet, as when I walked in I didn't feel anything weird or off. However, that didn't last long. Soon as I'd heard hard footsteps coming from the vacant apartment above some nights while I'll be getting ready for bed, I'd also hear what sounded like someone rummaging around in my kitchen. This would cause the plates to clink together in a plink noise that I would later find to be a bear with a hard nose I'd have sitting on the countertop in the kitchen. There were also a couple of times where I'd been messed with too. One time when my sister left to get lunch while I napped, I was pushed roughly into my bed. I could feel the hand against the back of my shoulder pushing me hard into my bed as I lay on my side. Then another time when I just laid down in bed one night only to have someone blow in my face. I could even hear the sound of it leaving their mouth and feel my hair sweep away from my face as I laid there. Each time I'd inspect my entire apartment. All of my windows would be down and locked and the front door completely locked and secure. All 4 locks. It was after these times that my cousin, we'll call her Key, they had asked if she could move in for a little while to share the space. She wanted to move away from her parents' home, and I honestly wanted her good nature and presence to calm my nerves and put me on a good path. But a few days it seemed like things were better. I wasn't hearing any rummaging in my kitchen, no footsteps above me, and certainly no pushing or blowing in my face. C had already partially moved in and decided that she wanted to go out for the evening to spend time with a friend and to grab some remaining boxes from her parents' house. Knowing she wouldn't be home for a while, I decided I'd lock all the locks on the door, take a long shower, the kind where you let the water take away all the stress of the day. I let her know that I'd be locking the locks and to call me to let me know she was almost home so I could make sure the deadbolt was unlocked. With her gone, I waved goodbye from the window facing the street where she was parked and hopped in the shower. About 10 to 15 minutes into my shower, I heard the door open and slam shut as if someone was angry. For some reason, it didn't dawn on me that I'd locked the locks up, so I thought to myself, is he angry about something? What happened? I then hear what sounded like somebody walking down the hallway carrying a heavy box. I heard it being placed on the bed in her room, which was directly across the hallway from the bathroom. Someone walked back toward the door, open it, and slam it shut again. Thought to myself, okay, I guess she's angry about something. I'll catch her when she comes back in, and I'm out. Then the door opens again and slams shut. I hear the sound of her coming back down the hallway, putting another box down and walking down the hallway. During this time, I was thinking, okay, no, she's angry. Let me catch her before she leaves to find out what in the world's going on. So I rushed to get a towel. Hear the door slam as I'm quickly drying off and wrapping myself and my hair in a towel. I rush out of the bathroom and run straight to the window in the living room. No C, no car. There's no way she could have driven off that fast, right? So I pick up my phone in the living room and give her a call. Ask why she left in such a hurry, slamming the door. She let me know that she hadn't been back home since she left, just made it to her destination. I just said, okay then, I'll let you get back to your friend. I hung up the phone. I then went walking back toward the shower to get back in and noticed wet, muddy boot prints going from the door all the way to the bathroom. They appeared to stop at the bathroom door like a person just stopped and stood there. In the last set, there was water surrounding the muddy prints. I was baffled. I knew it couldn't have been me. I was clean as I'd been in the shower for some time and had made sure I dried my body off, wrapped my hair in a towel, made sure my feet were dry so I wouldn't slip and slide down the hallway. So I looked into C's room just to prove her wrong because I heard somebody walk in with boxes. No boxes. Just her cat sitting there looking at me perplexed. So I walked back down the hallway and it dawned on me. I'd locked the doors. As I walked closer to the door, sure enough, all locks were locked, even the deadbolt that was only able to unlock and lock from the inside. So I made my usual rounds around the apartment, seeing that all the windows were closed and locked as well. I've told this story many times to friends and family. None of us can come up with a reason why there'd be muddy prints on the floor. Yeah, I was in the shower, but why would my feet be covered in mud if I've been in the apartment all day? I'd made sure to stop and rub them dry with my towel before running out of the bathroom. Also, if it were my cousin coming home, she doesn't wear boots, nor was it rainy. It was a sunshiny bright outside. Don't like that. Repeated visits from a spirit since childhood. Should I be worried? It had been a few years since the spirit visited me, but last night reminded me of all those horrifying nights as a kid. My paranormal experience seemed insignificant to me as a child, but as I shared them with others, I often got weird looks and concerning comments. These visits occurred pretty often as a kid and a teenager, but I'm in my 20s now. Recently, I've been visiting my grandparents down in Florida for the past few nights. My dad and I had to share a room, separate twin beds. He's pretty old and gets up to use the bathroom a lot. I had a very strange and vivid dream, which is very common for me. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I opened my eyes, peeked through the bottom of my eye mask. I saw what I thought to be my father walk from our bedside to the door to use the restroom. But when I lifted the mask to check on him, my father was sound asleep in his bed a few feet from mine. The dream itself was enough to make me wake up with a feeling of fear, but the feeling of some sort of presence added to it. This feeling is familiar to me, so I knew it really wasn't anything to be worried about, as nothing actually bad has really happened from it. I turned in my bed to get comfy, get back to sleep. But then my bed started rocking. It felt like somebody was manually pushing the side of it, like a shaking you'd get from almost like being on a boat. I'm really not sure how to describe it other than being quite unsettling. It's significant enough to keep me awake, mostly from fear of what the fuck is shaking my bed. I eventually calmed myself down. The shaking rocked me back to sleep, oddly enough. I woke up this morning recalling all the times this occurrence used to happen in my childhood. I brushed off these events as a kid because, well, nothing ever really came of them. I'd wake up at night and either be rocked back to sleep or I'd feel someone touching my back, or other times I'd hear their breath. Sometimes I'd wake up so paralyzed with fear that I was too scared to move with that presence and that feeling. It would happen in different locations, beds, houses, or even hotels. So whatever it is doesn't seem to be attached to the location, but to me, I suppose. I'm not well versed in paranormal events, spirits, ghosts, and whatnot, so I figured maybe somebody here could have a theory as to what's going on. My running theory is that some dead relative is trying to comfort me. I was adopted from a very bad household situation out of the country, so I'm not in touch with any blood relatives. So you think. Old house, loud noises that have started to reoccur after 10 years. Backstory as far as we know from the house. It was a first home for a couple with no kid. The wife lived into her 50s and the husband lived into his 80s. But they passed away whilst abroad. No information on their character or reputation as people. So 30 years ago, my parents bought a house that's 100 plus years old. It's detached and pretty good distance from our next neighbor. Suburban, but also a bit away. Before they moved into the house, the neighbors were having work done. And our house at the time was forgotten and pretty derelict. The builders said that the neighbors, they saw their elderly neighbor from our now current house walking down the garden arm and, well, walking down the garden arm in arm, and it was very sweet. Neighbors were quick to confirm the builders, well, nobody lived there for over 14 years, so it couldn't be possible. Mom and Dad moved in with my two older brothers. Things started to happen. Nothing malicious, more in a cheeky way, like objects around the house would go missing. Then they'd reappear in the most bizarre places. Footsteps above the doors, shutting footsteps running up and down the stairs. These are just to name a few, and with very minor details attached to them. If you're in the house alone, you hear what could only be described as someone dragging a piano from the attic, dropping it, and repeatedly getting louder until you have to leave the house. Anyway, with all this happening, my dad was a solid non-believer at the time. I guess most would say that it was sleep paralysis. However, this happened a few nights in a row, and my dad would see this elderly gentleman with loads of crates in his face be standing at the end of his bed. My mom loves the DNA and history stuff. Found out the husband who lived here before, who was a widower, passed away abroad. Had acne very bad, causing severe scarring in his face. Anyway, trying to cut a huge story very short, this stuff happened up until my mom and dad divorced. Dad stayed in the house and extended it, and things stopped happening. Fast forward 15 years later. I now live here, along with my two older brothers and their own families. House is fairly big and open plan, so it doesn't feel like we really live on each other. Fell over myself. So it doesn't feel like we live upon each other. Motorcycle started outside my yard. Sorry. 4 months ago, I was home alone, and my bedroom is situated downstairs opposite the stairs. I heard someone running up and down the stairs constantly, about 5 times. But the last time never coming back down. Reminder, everybody was not in the country, not possible to be a family member. Since then, everyone's experiencing the slamming of doors, the dragging sounds, and large footsteps. We had my sister-in-law's brother stay over during Christmas. Now, the house is open-planned and we don't want to be spooking him, so we didn't tell him about the recent creepy noises. 2 nights he stayed, and he told us the first night that he had dragging and low footsteps above him. And the second, somebody was going up and down the stairs, so he had to check if it was one of us. So in all, there's around 7 of us living here. Some INC separate from the house. And everybody's hearing these dragging and awful sounds from family to guests. I've heard thuds, and truth be told, a believer. But I don't understand why I'm hearing the dragging noises, but my family are. And also, why has this started again after so many years of nothing? Was it a bad thing or a good thing? And for context, I'm a 25-year-old female. I live with my brothers and dad and their other halves. Other halves have experienced the negative happenings, dragging, bolts, and locking. My dad has, but not so much me and my other brother who live in the house. Feeling tormented in my new home. Any advice is welcome. My boyfriend, my dog, and I just moved cross-country into a very old town with a dark history. We're renting a home, and since day one I felt uneasy about the basement. My dog has had extremely abnormal behavior whenever going to the basement as well. While staring into the room that makes my hair stand up, he began urinating. No squat or anything. That's before running up the stairs and refusing to come down for several days. Anytime I have to go down, it's a sickening feeling and an overwhelming fight-or-flight response. I've seen a tall shadow multiple times. Doors in the basement opening and slamming, and so much more. Where do I go from here? I'm uncomfortable being in my own home. I'd love to know the history of the house if there is anything, but I don't really know where to start. Any advice is welcome. There's much more if anybody wants more information. I'm most worried about whenever darkness is in the basement. Update. Thank you, everybody. I feel like with each passing day, things become more real. I set up 2 cameras, one in the basement and one in the hallway leading to the basement. I've read so much about orbs not being much proof, but one in the hallway has caught 4 orbs at 4 a.m. Only most nights. We also discovered the house has been cleansed previously with sage oil crosses above every doorway, windows, and mirrors except in the basement. I've spoken with several very spiritual people, and they recommend salt, sage, and blessing the home. I placed salt down and it was gifted sage, but I don't believe it was a good idea for me to use it, especially because at this time I lack the courage to face whomever's taking up her space confidently. I've contacted a local church to see about having the home blessed. I've been using positive affirmations to help keep positive energy upstairs. It's a small town and it has been difficult to track down records, but so far I've learned of an officer who may have passed away in the home in 1967. Ask Reddit 1. About a month ago, my friend came over to my house to hang out. There were 5 of us. It was about 7 p.m. We decided to go to this playground up the street from my house. While we were there, we decided that we should go to our old elementary school playground to get frozen yogurt before. After we got frozen yogurt and was driving there, we were talking about our elementary school's nature walk. And we were also talking about how we should go and walk through it again. My friend parked in the back of the school, which I didn't know there was parking there. We got out. We were walking around the school, just remembering old memories of us running around the field. I finally said that I didn't think it was a good idea for us to walk on the nature walk because it was getting dark. They all agreed, and we walked from the back of the school to the front. There were 2 people on the swings when we got there, but they left shortly after. Then 2 other people came with their mom. We saw them at the frozen yogurt place, and one was my old friend of mine's sister. My friends and I were just having fun. After the mom left with the 2 girls, we stayed there for about 20 more minutes until it was almost too dark. We honestly shouldn't have been there. We're in college, but we did have a lot of fun. When we were walking about to my friend's car, we were talking about something inappropriate. We got a weird vibe and chill walking back behind the school, but I ignored it. Something happened where my friends were kind of arguing and we were talking about it because it was inappropriate to talk about at an elementary school. They all of a sudden, in the corner of my eye, I see a light. I stop everybody and I say, "Did I just see that?" We heard a door swing open and we sprinted for the car. All of us, we jump in, my friends locked the doors and zoomed out of there so fast. We drove back to my house and we were all like, "What the fuck just happened?" No one was at the school at all. It's a tiny school and the parking was kind of limited. That scared all of us, and we don't know what happened, but we all agreed that we had a bad vibe walking back. Ask Reddit 2. I've had deja vu experiences before, but this was always slightly different. Once when I was 14 or so, I was standing in the kitchen drinking water or something. That's when all of a sudden I had an almost sudden urge to put my water down and begin aimlessly searching through the medicine cabinet. It was as if somebody had been doing what I was doing before and came back to tell me to do something specific. Almost invariably after, within 3 to 15 seconds, my parents would suddenly come home or show up quietly and run into me, and I would be completely unaware of their presence or arrival beforehand. Originally, I just chalked it up to me having some sort of guilty conscience and trying to get out of trouble, but it happened in many situations across my life. Even if there was no danger or risk of, really being in trouble being present. Sometimes I'd be laying in bed late at night when suddenly I'd feel a quick sense of immense worry and feel like practically being told to get up and pick something lying in my room. Or just stand there menacingly for no reason. Nothing would happen and eventually the feeling would subside, and I would go back to bed, but this odd urge keeps happening throughout my life and sometimes even got me out of trouble growing up. 60% of the time I got instructions somebody would enter soon or after or under a minute. I would always, it was a net positive feeling. It varied in specificity. It varied in its specificity instructions too. Sometimes it would just say to drop what I was currently doing and vacate the room as fast as possible, while other times it would give me guided instructions on doing something seemingly random that never amounted to anything. It technically really never said for me to do such and such like a set of instructions, but instead felt like a half deja vu, half internal motivation feeling that gave loose instructions. I've never really mentioned it to anybody simply because of how hard it would be to explain. I didn't want people to think I was insane or anything, since even I obviously realize it sounds really odd. But it occurs anywhere between once every year or so every couple of months, so I can't really forget about it. You might have a touch of hypervigilance. Not discrediting or discounting what you're saying, though. Ask Reddit 3. I'll preface this by saying I'm a secular person, no belief in those ethereal or religious things. But I still think about this. It still gives me pause. I was a host for the dinner at Victorian Manor, Larnax Castle, or Larnax Castle. Guests would come and stay in the lodgings, and they'd come to dinner in the old dining room itself. A real treat for those who traveled so far. Most nights my job was to entertain and serve the people staying on the grounds. The dining room could seat 14 at a table. Not many really, so if there were even more, then we'd extend another room. The music room. We'd set up 4 large trestle tables, push them together, and kind of place over a large elegant tablecloth to make it appear as one large banquet table. Now listen, the quote-unquote castle, it's just a big manor home. It's large, cold, creaky, and old. Everything moves and shifts, pipes rattle, floorboards squeak. But this room, the music room, something about it was off. Can't quite describe the feeling. Even in daytime, the room felt oppressive and heavy. It was a large room where you'd enter through a small dark passage. Tall windows which never seemed to let in the sun. A fire which never quite warmed the space. The only thing that seemed to liven the room was the guests, or anybody who played the very old piano. A good night of hearty conversation, laughter, and dancing. Well, it set the tone most times. People could enjoy themselves and tell stories of their travels, punctuated by a wash of beer and wine. Even in quiet times, there was an air of civility, respect for the place and its history. But empty before or after, there was something about it. Sometimes tourists wouldn't enter. They stood outside looking in, and when asked, they'd either say that they'd rather not enter, or say nothing at all. At first, I didn't exactly see why. I'd spent many nights going all the way to the top of the castle, entering each room and pulling the cord for the lights and closing the doors. Always just before midnight up the stairs to the top floor and working my way down, I was always asked to do this. It never felt scary or frightening to me. But for some reason, whenever asked, and even before I knew where, my job was to open curtains in the music room, I always did feel unsettled. I would keep my face down, turned to the side, and I firmly refused to see my reflection in the window. Sometimes in my mind, it just told me that I shouldn't. I discovered eventually that I could liven the room through music. Of course, each dinner that we played music from in a crappy plastic CD player, some drivel from the Victorian era, which really, no one on staff really wanted to hear and had heard millions of times. But there also was the piano. I was bold enough to play some nights. I knew a few era pieces. The guests would applaud, I'd take a small bow and get back to service. Sometimes, though, I was too tired or was simply too busy. But this is where I think I made my mistake. The first time, I guess I didn't really notice. The shadow in the corner of your eye is pretty easy to dismiss, and a light in a room turning back on is surely faulty wiring. A little shadow moving out of the door, that's your mind playing tricks. When those off nights began to frequent my staff, well, they weren't quite feeling it. The guests were quiet, the room felt cold. And after the guests left, the empty room even seemed a different color. No one wanted to clear it, not for the tables, the chairs, or even the tablecloth. I remember the first time that things felt wrong, and I mean truly wrong. It had been a rough night. It was me and one other waiter. The guests had left. We'd basically done all we needed to do. So I sent her home. The chef had left some time after dessert, just me left in the building. I ascended the stairs to turn off the lights, replaying the night in my head to figure out what went wrong. It seemed a perfectly calm night to me. So what gives? I switched off every light in every other room in the building, made my way down to the music room. I looked in. Couldn't bring myself to enter. I knew I had to go in, but I just couldn't. I left the table set up for the morning crew. When I left the castle, I looked back. I saw the parlor light at the very top of the castle was back on. I huffed, but I went all the way back up, frustrated to turn it off again. I ensured this time the switch was off. I leave again. I head to the car. I look back and the light's on. I leave it this time in the window. I think I see something moving. I don't go back in this time. And it's a while before the next instance of this sort of thing. The night manager started staying behind late to help pack down. This one night it had been a long one, so thankfully the chef had made up some food for us halfway else, so we'd be, exhausted otherwise. I hadn't played piano this night. I simply wanted to go home. I had dismissed my wait staff, I turned off every light upstairs, and it was just me and the night manager. I moved chairs from the music room to storage. I kept it up 2 at a time, quick as I could. I wanted to be done. I saw the manager washing dishes in the kitchen as I walked past each time, steadily working away, clattering and splashing in the sink. Great, I thought. We'll be out of here in no time. I've got the 2 last chairs from the head of the room, just the table and the tablecloth, which were still neatly arranged in the room. I stacked the 2 chairs in storage, make my way back, and slow as I approached the music room. From the entrance, I can see the corner of the tablecloth is folded over. Halfway over the bottom corner of the table, I can still hear the manager in the kitchen. I'd just seen her as I walked past. Absolutely no time for someone of her age to have moved that far that quickly. I approached the table slowly. I knew it could have only been myself that had done this, but it was folded over in such a way that I surely would have remembered doing so. It seemed intentional, as if moved in preparation to be folded. I set my hands down on the table, simply confused. I felt this immense weight. Suddenly, I couldn't move. I felt a sharp cold move through my body as I was forced closer and closer to the table. I panicked and I yelled, "Get off!" But I didn't know why. I managed to thrust myself sideways in my arms and walked swiftly back to the kitchen just around the corner. I looked to the night manager and simply said, "I think we should go." She looked at me and then she looked past me and replied, "Yes, I think we should." I didn't turn around. We literally stopped exactly what we were doing and simply left. We walked to the car park across the lawn. I didn't look back until I was at the car. I didn't want to believe it, and I still don't. But it still makes me feel sick. The parlor light was on and there was someone in the window. I didn't stay there much longer and decided to leave a few weeks after that, actually. And if it was a busy night, I gave the music room guests to my waiters. I didn't go back in at all after that night. It's been just over a decade since I worked there. I visited in autumn this year, though. I stepped into that room and I gave the old piano keys a few chords from Chopin. Somehow it felt right. But I cannot forget that feeling from that one night. My eyes well up retelling this now. It doesn't even seem that wild, but that awful weight. I don't think I'll ever return again. Gnome in my attic. When I was 15, I moved into my sister's old room and soon heard something crawling in the attic above me. I told my mom, and she never believed me until one day she was in my room and heard it as well. My stepdad crawled in that attic several times since then. Something to do with construction. He said he never saw any rat or droppings or any sign of anything up there. I also recently spoke with him and he assured me that the attic is sealed off, so nothing can get in, nothing at all. It's been 17 years and I still hear something crawling up there whenever I'm in this house. I've never thought of it being a gnome until recently, because I'm kind of obsessed with seeing one. I believe one actually randomly removed a stain from my clothes several months ago. Helpful gnome. My overalls were sitting on a chair for a few days and I remembered the stain. I go check and it's gone. Swear. It was on the chair drying instead of going into the dryer because I didn't want the stain to cook into the fabric. Thought I would try to remove it later. A few days later, nothing was ever there. I've left offerings from time to time, so maybe they're throwing me a bone. Last week, my friend and I are laying on his mat on the floor in said house. We hear some sort of drum roll within the mat or below, as if someone was tapping it with their fingers. I asked, "Did you hear that?" He's just like, "Yep." I'm like, "What the fuck?" And right then, something crashes into something right outside the window. The drumming stopped. It was so weird. My stepdad again confirmed the only thing beneath us is concrete, so he's starting to wonder as well. I get home the other day and right in the entryway is like this canvas painting on the wall. For some reason, I saw a blue orb shining through the canvas. I thought, that's odd. Is there a device behind here? Nope, there wasn't. I'm starting to hear knocks right around that wall now, too. A few weeks ago in the same house, I woke in the middle of the night and heard tapping on my mirror. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm seeing something from the corner of my eye, but my vision's been iffy since COVID, so who knows? Oh, also in the beginning, I sort of shut down and woke up a wooden flute playing in my ear. 3 knocks at the door at night when no one's there. I've had spiritual experiences in life and at this house, so I don't know if it's multiple things or just fae. Featherfoot. To set the scene, I was living with my mother as well as 2 brothers, ages 12 and 15, me being the youngest, 8 turning 9. And I live in Australia, where there's a belief that if you mistreat children, they will be visited and sometimes taken by the Featherfoot. Okay, so I was young and don't really remember much from that time because unfortunately I've repressed a lot of memories. We had no father around and mom was always either intoxicated or UTI, so she always had a lot of guys coming over to visit at any hour. Intoxicated or UTI? Ow. Moving on. On this particular day, I don't remember many details. All I know is that my grandmother and grandfather dropped me off at Mom's house after going ice skating. I was sore from falling over a lot and exhausted from the trip, so I walk inside my front glass sliding door into the lounge where I announce my arrival to no response. I shrug my shoulders and lay down on the couch with my chocolate milk and basically pass right out after turning the TV on. I wake up almost as if I was struck by lightning because I'm like sitting up before I realize I'm awake, heart pounding and drenched in sweat. I take a few breaths and I feel like I've been running for the whole time I was sleeping. I rub my eyes and I can hear my TV playing the Men in Black theme song. I remember giggling at the weird worm aliens in the video. Can't remember all the time. I know it was dusk and the sun was just finishing its descent. I watched for a little while longer, then I stood and started turning to go to the kitchen, where I stood frozen. Standing around 5 feet behind the glass door, looking right into my eyes, there was an almost 7-foot figure standing in my front yard, not moving an inch, still staring right in my eyes, and I yell, Mom's not here right now, so fuck off. Thinking or hoping maybe it was one of her friends. I felt cold and shivers just ran up my spine as a car drove down the street lighting up the humanoid. I could see he had wings like an angel, 4 of them shining and reflecting in the light of the car, and it was covered in pitch black feathers. It was at this point my heart sank. I fell to my knees and I just started bawling my eyes out. I cried for what felt like hours, wiping tears from each eye, separating, just taking my eyes off it until it was swallowed by the dark of the night. Sliding back until I was flush against the wall, I just sat there staring at the darkness behind the glass door. That was until my family came back, after turning the lights on, of course. Now that I think back on it, I don't know why I started crying. Inside, I just felt a sadness so heartbreaking I can't even explain it. Never seen it again. Also, it's the only paranormal experience I've had. Seems substantial. Unwanted house guest. Hey everyone. I'm going to try to keep this relatively short. I do want to make a few disclaimers before sharing the story. I don't necessarily believe in very paranormal instances. However, I've had very strange coincidental events happen that I started to really think they're not just coincidence. The 2 events, though, I've been living with things. My childhood dog and an ex either before death or before a serious medical issue happening. I won't get into them unless asked, due to possible importance, but I just want it to be known. Due to those 2 events, somebody said I seem to be clairsentient, but I don't know. Anyway, this is a separate event that has really freaked me out. To give some background on the house, the story and people who lived in it. My significant other and I, we are a male 26-year-old and a female 25-year-old. We had the opportunity to buy his grandmother's house. They said grandmother 91 is a wonderful, extremely religious woman who's sadly in a nursing home until she passes due to dementia. This woman has lived in her house for 70 years, 50 or so being alone as her husband passed that long ago. I don't really know how or where he passed. She never remarried or dated. Her house is being offered to family members, first at least, before going onto the market. The house looked like it was from the 1950s, as in nothing inside seemed to have changed. Wallpaper, carpets, doors, and windows. My significant other, which I'm going to now from here on just call your girlfriend. My girlfriend and I went to visit the house Saturday night because it was the only spare time that we both had to really look into the house. The family is giving him 1 week to decide. We parked in the driveway to see a light on in the living room. We thought somebody may be in the house, but it turns out it was a light that stays on just to look like someone's home, you know? So we got inside and my girlfriend stated some things, like posters had been moved in her living room from the bedroom to seemed kind of odd. To him. Scrolling back up. I don't know anymore. However, family does have access to the house, and a health person comes to the house for paperwork. I've been in this house a few times before to visit his grandmother and felt fine with the environment. When I stepped into the house, my chest instantly tightened, like fight or flight tightening. That had never happened to me before. Well, we went through the house that needed a lot of work. The last room we looked at was his grandmother's room, and well, it was also stated by my girlfriend or boyfriend that the only dresser in the room may have been his grandfather's, and that we wouldn't keep it. When we left the room to go downstairs to leave the house, there's a small side table at the entryway to the bedroom inside my bedroom. I don't know if my boyfriend accidentally hit the table while leaving the room, but a picture fell. I was still in the room and made a joke that it was an omen. I'm not a fan of the house with all the work that needs to be done, so for the price, it was being asked for at least. My boyfriend bent down to pick up the picture that fell onto the table. He picked it up and looked at it. An old-style trifold frame of Mary holding Jesus. Now, I'm not religious at all, nor do I know a lot about biblical references, but I know when something seems off. The feeling I had from the beginning and then that picture falling just made me extremely uncomfortable. What attacked me? Dream encounter I don't know. This happened about 10 years ago. I was 19 at the time. A little context. I'd moved from my parents' house at the age of 17 for college. My dad passed away a year later. My mom got really depressed, 27 years married. So me and one of my older sisters decided to move back in with her to keep her company and help the best we could. On that particular weekend, my mom went on a trip with my aunts, and it was just me and my sister in the house. From a kid, I never liked my parents' room. It had a weird vibe, but I decided to sleep in my mom's room because of the TV. This story has two versions, mine and my sister's, but we'll start with mine. I fell asleep watching movies. The bathroom doors and the front of the bedroom door I slept in. In the early hours, being 4 or 5 a.m., I woke up to a tall figure standing in this hallway. It's between the two doors, and thought it was my sister. She's very tall and a sleepwalker, so I called her name. When I did, the thing just ran and jumped at me, held me down. During the attack, I thought it was a real person, like a burglar or something. It was on top of me, held one of my arms up, and with the other arm it shut my mouth. It held my arm with its elbow. All I could see was the eyes, big blue eyes. Beautiful even. No face, just this figure with eyes. I struggled, and for a second its hand from my mouth, so I screamed at the top of my lungs. My sister woke up and ran to my room. The thing jumped from me, and I saw it go past my sister through the door. I screamed for her to catch it, to run and shut the door back of the house. She just stood there saying, "What? Where? There's no one here. You're dreaming. Wake up." The neighbor showed up at our gate calling my mom because he woke with a scream. I was really terrified. And that was it. Nobody saw anything, just me. The only proof I had was a purple bruise on my arm where its elbow was holding me down. My sister says that when she got to the room, I was laying looking at the ceiling. My memory is different. I was sitting up on the bed. Am I being pranked? I think the ghost is messing with me. Can they do that? It's almost comical, but I'm starting to think I'm cracking up. A few years ago, I discovered my mom's wedding rings went missing. I tore the house apart. Found some empty jewelry boxes in the guest room closet, which was pretty strange. I eventually gave up looking, and I assumed that they were stolen by a cleaning lady or something. A year later, I went out to dinner, pulled out a small jewelry box to put on some earrings. I wore the earrings, came home to find the missing wedding rings placed in this tiny box. Weird, eh? After that, nothing too strange happened. Until now. I was staging the house to sell, and I had to move all my office equipment into the garage. So I boxed up my keyboard, my mouse, etc. After the move, I was setting up my new office. Mouse was missing. Searched everywhere, unpacked every box. Weeks go by, and I just end up getting a new one. A few weeks after that, I stop at the car wash and clean, vacuum, and scrub the leather seats. This car is clean, y'all. I go home, park the car, do normal TV things, and go to bed. The next morning, I leave to get breakfast. A stupid missing mouse is sitting there. It's right in the middle of the seat in the car in my locked garage. Like, what? Last week, I was working alone all day at home, as I do every day. Left the house for 2 hours, and when I returned home, several kitchen drawers are wide open. Empty drawers. nothing's missing. Not even from the one right next to them with the cash and the credit cards in it. Why would a ghost steal a stupid Apple mouse and return it 3 months later? Why would a person, for that matter, even? I've now changed all the locks and reset every code and set up cameras like a crazy person. Human or non-human entity, I guess I'll figure it out eventually. Let him borrow it. See ya.